What's going on, everybody? So this podcast is brought to you by the 6th Annual Joining Forces Conference, and this is hosted by the Children's Advocacy Center of Hidalgo and Starr counties. You'll be able to join us September 2nd and 3rd at DHR Convention Center in Edinburgh, Texas. You can get tickets at cachidalgo.org/events. All right, without further ado, let's get to the podcast. All right, guys, so on this podcast, I have author Pennie Saum. Now, you wrote a book called Brave Unbroken with Kat Caparello, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this book?
Yeah, that book is actually the memoir of my life story and the trauma that I experienced through sexual child abuse at the hands of my biological father, and also the loss of my mother through lung cancer.
Yeah, when I was reading some of it, it's gut-wrenching in some parts. Give us a little bit of background of who you are and what you do and how you became an author of doing this book.
Yeah. So as a child, from infancy through almost age 18, I was abused sexually, physically, and emotionally, not physically, by my biological father. And as the years went on, the episodes of abuse and rape were multiple, many, many times per day. And my brother was also being abused by the same person in the same house, but we didn't know about each other. And that didn't come out until later, when I was almost 18 and he was 14. And my mother stood up when she knew what was going on. She did everything she could to do the right thing. And our biological father was prosecuted and sentenced to 17 and a half years in prison in Washington State. And then fast forward a little bit of time, a civil case and trial was done on behalf of my brother. Mine was thrown out because of statute of limitations. And my brother was awarded $5 million in restitution. And because our biological father was a military retiree of the U.S. Army and an officer, his military retirement was protected, and he didn't have to pay a dime of that restitution whatsoever. Wow. And so after my mom went through the lung cancer and more family secrets were kind of evolving, and she passed away, I decided it was time to tell my story to help others be able to find their voices.
It's a very interesting subject because y'all were under the same roof, but you had no idea that this was going on?
No, not at all. And, as the oldest, I always thought if I just did what he wanted me to do and did what he told me, that my brother would be protected. And I figured that because he was a boy, not thinking that he could be being abused at the same, by the same person. And I think our biological father was very good at manipulation and grooming and the stories that he would tell and the threats that he would make. And so we were both just too scared to talk to each other about what was going on.
So what?
And really, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and in the same house, it was the same with my mother, and he was really, really good. He's very manipulative, and like we see in most child abuse cases, the adults, they know what they're doing. They're very strategic and very manipulative.
So let's talk about the situation that you went through. Obviously, there's some similar things that abusers do in situations like this. What were some triggers that you saw that were sure tell signs that this was going on?
For me, it was a lot of violent threats. I wouldn't see my mother again. I wouldn't see my brother again. That I was the one that was keeping the family together. I heard that a lot in the younger years. And, I became pretty withdrawn at school, but, a smile on my face so no one would know the difference. The few times that I tried to speak to adults about it, I was kind of blown off. Like at a youth group Bible study when I think I was 9 or 10 and said, I think my dad loves me in a different way. And they're like, oh, all dads love their oldest daughters in different ways. So then, of course, I'm like, oh, well, this must be normal. He must be right. So I think there's a lot of things like that are significant signs. I think we try to tell in the words that we know when we're children. And if we don't know the right words, it's hard to tell, especially if you're being threatened and and manipulated on the backside.
Right. It's a very interesting time for, especially for kids, because I mean they only know what adults teach them. They're surrounded by adults, so they assume everything is right, whatever they do. What are some tools that kids can use that can help differentiate what they're going through, or how can they seek help?
Yeah, I think one of the number one things is my body, my choice, and that is included in family members, adults, your parents, your grandparents, guardians. Nobody should be touching you in ways that are not comfortable or safe, and that includes areas that are covered by a bathing suit or regular areas. Also, using your parts or being asked to use your body to do things to other people's bodies, especially adults' bodies or other, kids' bodies. That's really, really important. And I think if it doesn't feel right, it's not right, and it's okay to talk and speak about it, and that adults will hear you and see you. And we're teaching and educating adults at a more rapid pace now, to where adults are understanding and learning more.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I've read stories, I've heard stories from the CAC. Is like there's these kids that were trying to tell adults, and they just brush them off. They brush them off, and a lot of them were like, okay, well, I mean, who do I go to? Who do I talk to? Right. It's a very strange thing for kids to go through, especially when you're in a family that obviously looks like from the outside they love each other. Everybody's smiling, everybody's having a good time, especially now right. with the rise of social media, where everybody's taking selfies and you're on a beautiful vacation, and that's, everybody's putting their best life forward on social media. What do you see on your end as far as like social media and families?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think my children didn't have cell phones until they were 13, and I really debated that. Very limited use. And with social media, I think it can be such a devastating tool and also a good tool. I think families do. They want everybody to think they're perfect. And you know what? We're not perfect. Everybody has stuff. Whether your house isn't clean, or you haven't mopped, or you've been abused or raped or molested. And I see nothing wrong with putting that out there. I mean, anybody who's on any of my social media sites, they know what I talk about. We do talk about some happy things, but we also talk about the hard things. And I think it's important, because I think one person might see that or hear that, a podcast or a video, and realize that, I'm not alone. I can talk about this, and that's okay. And I think with kids, doing happy selfies all the time and trying to be and just like everyone else and all the other kids, they said, it's just too much. Yeah.
You're absolutely right, because I was having a conversation with my daughter the other day, and I made a conscious choice to be able to not show my children on Facebook, on Instagram and Snapchat so much as I used to, right? Because I have no idea. There's a bunch of weird people out there, and the last thing I want them to do is to be able to use a picture of my child to do whatever. I don't know. But she was saying, well, why can't I have my own YouTube channel? I was like, when you're old enough, you'll be able to do whatever you want. But at this point, you're young. Like I'm choosing for you not to be able to be on these platforms, because I don't even know what my content's being used for. I mean, I want to have this great image, right? But at the end of the day, people can manipulate all this stuff and do whatever they want with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, we do. We put our kids out there, and, I say make sure you've got all your security features in place on Facebook so that nobody else can find your pictures but the people you've given permission to. And kids really don't need to be on social media, especially YouTube. And I post and share tools for parents all the time and families, because apps like TikTok and Whisper and all these things that, kids think are so cool. There's backdoors to all of it, including Zoom, and using Zoom lately and how much we're using it to meet up with friends and work. There's, trolls jumping in on those. So I highly recommend that kids don't have phones and they don't use social media. There's really no benefit to it. And we've seen it a direct link to childhood depression and anxiety, and I think that's a problem. When I was going to school, I'm 46 now. When you left school and you went home, maybe you had a phone call with a friend, but you didn't have visibility to what everybody was doing all the time. So you didn't feel bad about not being included or missing out on something. And I think we still need that disconnect. We need to be able to say, this is my school life. This is my home life. And people don't need to know what you're doing all the time.
It's a very interesting time because right now, obviously with COVID-19, the coronavirus, a lot of people are indoors. A lot of families are indoors and they're forced to use technology now. It was kind of like a blessing and a curse where everybody has to jump on technology now, especially like for schools. Right. But I want to talk about how child abuse, actually the numbers go up when people are in these situations. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is, and actually I was talking to Hidalgo County CAC this week on a podcast of my own, and when kids are in school and in their activities, sports, swimming, whatever it may be, music lessons, those people they're spending time with are the ones who are seeing the instances of abuse cases and helping get them raised out, especially when kids aren't speaking about them. And so teachers are the ones who are making reports, or principals, or swim teachers, or coaches, or church people. And so what we're finding is kids are home more. A lot of them are home with their abusers, like 89-90% of the abuse it occurs with someone that they know. There's no one to help them have a voice. And so even though the calls are down right now, the more violent cases that we're actually seeing calls on are up. And what's going to happen is the system's going to be flooded once we get kids back in school because of what they've been going through. And so it's a really, really scary time. And I think as neighbors and family and friends, if their kids were worried about, my rule is every single one of us adults are mandated reporters, and it's our responsibility to keep our eyes open. Even with social distancing and physical distancing, a phone call to check in on a child, questions, conversations, talk to somebody across the parking lot or the street at your home. But we have got to do everything we can to help to keep these children safe that are potentially in spaces where they're being abused, especially in this situation we're in right now.
No, you're absolutely right. Obviously, this podcast is brought to everyone on behalf of the Children's Advocacy Center of Hidalgo County and Starr County. And just to let everybody know that the center is open. Like, we're open and they're taking calls and they're still going through everything. Of course, they're respecting the personal space and all that stuff that we have to do with the 6 feet apart. But I just want everybody to know that they are open, they're taking calls, and it's an important time to be able to give these requests out any way you possibly can. And of course, I have to give a shout out to all the employees out there. They're the real heroes. I go in every now and then and I hear a few of these stories and I like take it with me. It like gets absorbed and I feel a certain way. It comes with me, but I can imagine the people that are there that are listening to these stories all the time. Have you ever experienced anything like that on your end?
Yeah, as a survivor, I get a lot of times where an adult will say, I've never told anybody. I've also had parents where they think that something's happening to their child. So I have had those conversations and I have heard those stories, and it's so very, very important that we say, I hear you, I see you, I believe you, and take action. And like you said, brought to you by the CAC at Hidalgo and Starr counties in Texas, make the phone call. They have resources even in this emergent time. They're doing everything they can to make safe spaces for people. Call the sexual assault hotline of the United States if you need to. But if anybody at all, if you have any inkling that there potentially could be something wrong, it's our responsibility to make a phone call and take action. And there's nothing wrong with an assumption and doing a wellness check and making sure someone's safe. It's much rather that happen than the violence that can occur or the death that can occur with child abuse.
Absolutely. So your book, Brave and Unbroken, what's the goal of this book?
Yeah, the goal of that first book was I wanted everyone not so much to know my story, because really, there's a million of those stories out there, but it was more about wanting people to know that they could survive and thrive out loud. And I think that's something that as child abuse victims or sexual assault victims or rape victims, our society is still not ready to talk about those words: incest, rape, molestation. And I think my goal with that book and my memoir and my website and my podcast and the videos is, and a play that we're working on, is that survivors, average, everyday victims of child sexual abuse, who are adults now or kids, rape victims, that they too have a voice and have safe places to be able to talk and speak. And I think that's the first step to healing, is to be able to talk to anybody or write it down, put it out there in the world. And that's what I wanted with this memoir, was just, I might have been feeling broken, but I'm on the other side of it, where I realize I am brave, I am unbroken, and I want other people to acknowledge that too. We all survive in silence, and we make it through our everyday, in whatever our life looks like. But to be able to step out and survive and thrive out loud, is really the purpose of Brave and Unbroken.
So how can somebody get a hold of this book?
Yeah, you can find it on my website, www.braveandunbroken.com. It's also on Amazon. You can find it on Kindle or any Barnes & Noble, any kind of book resource store. Our website right now is shipping only. So the book is free. I want to get it out into many hands as I can, especially in COVID, with the situation we're in right now. And if you're in a situation where you can't pay for the shipping, all you got to do is email me, and we'll make sure you get a book.
That's awesome.
It's just way too important of a topic. I had someone say to me, "What do you want? You want us to talk about this in the grocery stores over picking up oranges?" And I said, yes. I want us to get to a place where, you know what, this is commonplace that we talk about it, so that people continue to be more aware.
Pennie, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Please tell us where we can listen to your podcast and your website.
Sure. The podcast is also listed on the website, and the memoir is listed there, www.braveandunbroken.com. You can also find it on Apple iTunes, and all the other players that are out there, Spotify.
Awesome. Pennie Saum, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Josh.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, guys, so if you like what you heard, go ahead and like our page, share our page, and share our message during April. This is Child Abuse Awareness Month, and we want to get our message out to as many people as possible.